Welcome to Livestream. Happy Sunday afternoon. Happy, it's an hour different time than you thought it was going to be, isn't it? Because the time changed. Well, these days, you know, your phone just automatically updates. All our clocks just automatically update, so maybe not. Those of you who are, this is the European stream. That's why we stream on Sunday afternoons for the Europeans. It's evening their time, trying to accommodate them. Their time changes a couple weeks later than ours to summertime. So they're like, why did you change the time of your stream? That's my generic European accent. It's German. I suppose it's vaguely German. And I'm like, I didn't. We changed all of our clocks. It's here in America. It's the time that I said it would be. Blue Sky FPV says, time change. Stopped that nonsense years ago. I wish we could go to summertime all the time. And people say, because I am self-employed, I work from home, and I can set my own hours. And so usually I would rather, sleep in a little bit later and then have a little more light in the evening. But people say, well, we don't like going to work in the dark. And I'm like, I don't care about you and your preferences. I just want the world to align itself around me. And I feel like summertime is obviously the way to go. And I think if there's anything that we should divide our society over, that should be it. Summertime versus standard time. Also, I kind of like the idea that, like, the universe says, this is when noon is! The sun is up directly overhead! And we say, no! Time is a construct. We're going to do it however we want. Magic. So, summertime. Both practically and on principle. And we are now in summertime, so we get a little extra sunlight. Fantastic. What I'm going to be doing with these hours of daylight is answering your questions. Answering your questions about FPV. Blunty's got them queuing up right now. Blunty's queuing them up. Here's the queue. The queue is already 20 questions long, so we may as well get to it. Just a reminder, I'm going to take the questions in whatever order I feel like. Blunty will queue them. I'll answer the ones I like. And then in a little bit, I'll do super chats. If you want to leave a super chat, that is the way to mostly 99% guarantee I'll answer your question on stream. Everything else is a complete crapshoot based on just how me and Blunty are feeling during the day. You hit the $sign down below, hit super chat, leave a couple bucks, and I will read the questions in just a little bit. I don't try to read super chats as soon as they come in because, again, you can't tell me what to do. I don't even pay attention to the position of celestial bodies in the sky. Never mind, though, you must answer my question because I left a super chat right now. I'm going to answer it in 10 minutes. Because I have oppositional defiant disorder. Okay, so let's answer some questions. Am I coming out with a sub 250 drone ever? Yep, I sure am. Why do people? Is this a setup? You mean this sub 250 drone right here? This one here? You mean this series of videos that I am literally last night was in the process of preparing to release soon? This sub 250 build kit? That? Yeah, that's real close to being released. So, yeah, that's coming. You want to see it fly? Well... Flying an FPV drone is like riding a roller coaster in the sky, except you get to control where the roller coaster goes. FPV drones give you the speed and excitement of motorsport. They give you the fluidity of motion and expression of dance or gymnastics.
Pretty good.
Without any of the athletic requirements. They give you the inner...
Yeah.
So that's coming. It's coming. I feel like it's fair to say it's coming this week. Anyway, there you go. Given the results of Josh's testing of the BDI antennas, do you think if BDI made a linear polarized antenna kit, we'd see even better performance? The real question, so the argument there is that the DJI antennas are linear polarized, and BDI released some aftermarket antennas that were circular polarized. And when you match a circular polarized antenna to a linear polarized antenna, you get, I think it's a 3 dB reduction in performance because of the mismatched polarization. The real question, and yet the BDI antennas improved on the stock antennas. And the reason the BDI antennas improved on the stock antennas is that they're higher gain. That's the short answer. So we're losing 3 dB to the mismatched polarization, but like let's say the DJI stock antenna is a 2 dB antenna and the BDI is like an 8 dB antenna. I don't know if it is. I'm just making these numbers up for the sake of discussion. So we're losing 3 dB to the mismatched polarization, but we're gaining 6 dB to the increased gain, and the net effect is a 2, 6, 4 is a 4 dB gain, and we have a net positive. You would expect that the antennas would be best performing when they were matched circular to circular, and it's fairly easy to do circular antennas on your O3 or your O4. It's fairly, whereas upgrading the goggles is more tricky, although BDI tells me that they have a kit coming for the G3. As well. So I'm looking forward to that. The real question that I've always wondered is why did DJI put linear antennas on their system? The disadvantage of linear antennas is that linear antennas, when they're perfectly matched, their polarization, have 0 dB of loss. But then when they're 90 degrees out of polarization with each other, there's like 15 or more dB of loss, which is a huge amount of loss. Now, so... And that is the physical orientation of the antenna on the drone. Literally, you could be flying your drone like this and have perfect orientation, and you rotate your drone 90 degrees, and now you have 15 dB of loss. In reality, it's not that simple because as the signal bounces around the environment, the polarization changes, and at any given time, the antenna, the receiving antenna, may be receiving multiple polarizations of the same signal, so it's more complicated than that. But circular polarization is free of that effect. If you have 2 circular polarized antennas, then the orientation of the drone doesn't matter. And it seems like you also have advantages when it comes to multipath cancellation. It seems like circular polarized is the way to go for a video system. But DJI is not stupid. DJI engineering is top notch. Their marketing and sort of business decisions leave something to be desired sometimes when you're like, hey, will you fix this bug? And DJI is like, nah, we don't feel like it. But their engineering leaves nothing to doubt. So the decision to make their antennas linear had some basis. I don't know what it would be, and it's always confused me a little bit. Okay. Any good 15-liter FPV backpacks? I don't know about 15 liters. But I will say... can I... Someone just sent me a link for a new FPV backpack. I'll never find it again, though. Is this it? I think this is it. I did find it. Good for me. Wait a second. I'm going to show it to you. Don't worry. Yeah, I believe this is it. I'm always excited when a new FPV backpack comes out. I'm kind of a, I like backpacks. This is a new, by the way, I'm not endorsing this backpack. I just think it's fun when a new FPV backpack comes out and I get excited. This is 30 liters, so that's more than 15. Is that too big for you? Check this thing out. It's kind of cool. So it's got that old style layout. Do you remember the very first frickin'... I'm not going to remember the name of the company that made it. I'm going to blank on it. It has this style of divider where you can put your drone flat on the inside. And then your controller goes behind it. That's clever. I haven't seen one of those in a long time. Instead of the usual way with straps or buckles or elastic, they've got this kind of hook to hold your drone on. Clever. Battery bag. Kind of cool. Let me see if I can find more pictures. There's more pictures on the... Now, this is a company that makes photography bags, so that always excites me, because if, like, just some random Chinese factory comes out with a backpack, it's possible that it's poor quality manufacturing, like, but a company that already makes photography bags branching into FPV, I think you can probably trust that it's well-made. We got this style of divider. Maybe will it hold securely? I don't know. We have to see. Various ways to divvy up the pack. Yeah. 2 drones on top, controller on the bottom. Yeah, some suggestions. It feels like this is going to have less usable space. And whatever the 30 liters say. It feels like it's going to have less usable space than like the Rotor Riot bag that I'm currently using. Because it tries to put more stuff inside. Like, it's intended that you're going to put your drone on the inside. Which, if that's what you want to do, fantastic. But then you're losing all this space for all the other crap you put in there. So, you know, you have to decide if this is the right bag for you. But if you're looking to put your drone on the inside, there aren't many bags that really focus on that today. And so it's nice to have that available. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, check that out. I might buy one. I'm thinking about buying one just because I'm always, like I said, I'm always excited when a new backpack comes out. I'm like, ooh, new backpack. Yes, this will be the one that finally organizes all of my things with no compromises. Right? Clearly. Anyway. Marty Sepp says, drone hardware has been told to be okay. I have default settings for everything. Sometimes when coming out of fast dive, it just stops working and crashes. Whoa. Would need to see black box and or DVR. The question is, like, did your flight controller disarm or did you have a motor desync? And it death rolled. Red Eye Joe says $300 for a backpack. Damn, that's a really standard price for like a high quality bag like this. Like just a backpack that's just a big bag that zips up, right? Doesn't have the custom dividers and shit. Those can run, you know, those run cheaper because they're made in larger volume. But a specialty bag, like a photo bag that's sold in small volume and has like custom dividers and stuff, $200 to $300 is just a standard price. I understand that Grim Ripper is streamceptioning me, and now people are in the chat saying streamception and having a good time. I can assure you that the moderators will not appreciate your hijinks and will time you out. And if that makes me a fuddy-duddy, so be it. But that's the vibe we go for here. We don't have fun here. We don't goof around. You keep that shit over on Grim Ripper's stream. That's where that belongs. He seems fun. I'm a nerd. And I appreciate when other people have fun. I look over at them having fun and go, and I kind of awkwardly wish I was part of the fun, but don't actually. Then I just quietly go back to my room. Yeah, keep that shit over on Grim Reaper's stream. I support it at a distance. Winter says, I recently got an Air 75 and have been a bit rough on it and have found the antenna UFL keeps popping off. What type of adhesive is best? I have some B7000 from other projects. Okay, guys, I've seen this question recently, like on Facebook on the Cadix page. I don't think I'm going to find it here. What adhesive is the right adhesive to hold a UFL on? People suggested like E6000. That's not it. I mean, it might work. E6000 dries tacky, and that stuff dries kind of hard, almost like epoxy, but it's not epoxy. And I'm not even going to go look on Facebook. I'll never find it. What adhesive is the right adhesive? Not hot glue. No. Hot glue, I mean, it might work, but that's not the right adhesive either. William says B7000 or T7000. B7000, people are saying B7000. It dries fairly hard, but it still will peel off. B7000 is what I'm hearing. All right. Sounds like you got the right stuff. Yeah, hot glue especially won't work on a video transmitter because the video transmitter gets hot and the hot glue softens. Mick Q asks, I have an issue with one of my props. The front right prop nut keeps getting unscrewed during flight. I'm using lock nuts and have replaced lock nuts. Why does this keep happening? I mean, presumably you're tightening it enough. Is there an issue with the shaft where the threads on the shaft are messed up? I've seen a situation where I had a situation once, this is probably not what happened to you, but this was a big motor, like a 30 millimeter motor on a 13-inch prop. And the prop that was being used had a thin hub so that the nut went all the way down the shaft to the unthreaded portion of the shaft and still wasn't completely tight. So we needed a spacer, basically. And because of that, I kept tightening it down and I stripped out the bottom threads on the shaft so that then the nut kind of seemed like it was tight, but it wasn't tight and it kept loosening up. That's the kind of thing I wonder if it's happening to you. If you have a good nylock nut, it shouldn't loosen, even if there's, as Platty says, vibrations from a bent shaft. Do not use Loctite for props, Jonomicon. The solvent in the Loctite disintegrates the props. Can I use a SpeedyB F405 on Ardupilot? I think so. I would have said no, but because I didn't realize that Ardupilot would run on an F405, but people told me I was wrong, and they were right. Here it is. SpeedyB F3, F4, V3, V4, supported by Ardupilot. So you can, amazingly. Very cool. How about that? Marty Sepp says, another question. Sometimes RSSI and link is 0 when I start my quad. Then I disconnect, reconnect the battery, and it's good. Is something wrong? No. I'm going to guess that you're using ExpressLRS. When you power up an ExpressLRS receiver, by default, the timeout is 60 seconds. After 60 seconds, it goes into Wi-Fi mode. So if you plug in your quad, set it down, and then go do something else for a minute, then when you power up your controller, the receiver's in Wi-Fi mode and it won't connect. You should always power up your controller first, or at the very least, power up your controller within 1 minute of when you power up your drone. That's probably what's going on. God McBee says, I'm familiar with setting my RSSI DBM warnings for the ELRS receivers based on frequency and packet rate. What would I set on a Gemini X dual band receiver? There's no DBM threshold info. God McBee, that's an interesting question, and I have to tell you, this is the first time I've considered the question, and now I'm going to make up the answer. I think the answer is right, but I want you to know I'm making it up on the spot. I think the threshold is different for 900 megahertz versus 2.4 gigahertz. In fact, I'm sure of that because I have done tests in the past where I compared 50 hertz at 900 megahertz with 50 hertz at 2.4 gigahertz, and there's like a 6 dB difference in their RSSI threshold. So when you're doing Gemini crossband, you're using dual bands. There is no single DBM threshold, is there? There's one threshold for 900 and one threshold for 2.4. It just highlights that RSSI DBM is not the most meaningful way of knowing what your link is doing. Really, LQ and SNR are the most meaningful way of knowing what your link is doing. If your LQ is above maybe 80, then you're good. If your SNR, well, the SNR can be even as low as 0 and still be okay. I think SNR can get down to like -3 in some cases, and ExpressLRS will still be okay. But you should be, RSSI DBM is better for knowing when your antenna is messed up, when your receiver is messed up or something. okay? Or if your output power is not high enough. RSSI DBM is minimally useful in flight for knowing if you're about to fail-safe. For two reasons. Number one, if you don't know what your DBM threshold is, then it's not that useful, but you might know what your DBM threshold is, so set that aside. Number two, because it doesn't take into account interference. You can have a situation where your DBM is acceptable, but you have interference and your LQ is still going down and your SNR is poor. So I always have RSSI DBM in my on-screen display. Just like, I always have in my car has a gauge readout for oil pressure. Okay? I don't care what the oil pressure is. As long as the oil light is off, I'm good. Like, is it high? Is it low? I don't really know. I'm not really paying attention, but it's always there. And someday, if I run into a problem, maybe I'll look at it. And that's what RSSI DBM is for me. Marty Sepp says he's using Crossfire. Crossfire, I have seen situations where the Crossfire receiver doesn't bind when you first power it up, and then you power cycle it and it binds. I have no idea why. It's just a random thing that happens with Crossfire sometimes. Sometimes you have to rebind it. Sometimes it literally just doesn't bind until you rebind it. I have no idea. Superficientite says, I've just bought a Beta FPV Meteor 75 Pro and a Pavo Femto with O4 air units. I currently have an Avata 2, so that Goggles 3 and the RC3. How do I connect it all together? I have Betaflight. I mean, here's what I would tell you. You're going to bind the O4 to the goggles. Okay? You press the bind button on the O4, you hold the power button down for 5 seconds on the goggles, and they will bind. The goggles, if the goggles are in Avata mode, when you try to bind them, they will say, hey, you're in the wrong mode. Do you want me to switch modes? And it will switch to the O4 mode. There's a different mode for the O4 Lite and the O4 Pro, but the goggles, when you try to bind, they'll just switch modes. If you're not binding, you just are switching quads, you need to switch modes manually, and it's in the status menu. You go status, and then you can switch which air unit you're using. Okay, so that's the first thing. Bind it, and then later when you go to use it, you need to manually switch modes depending on which air unit you're using. For the controller, I'm going to point you to this tutorial. That's not something I can summarize on a live stream. It's a somewhat involved process, and the video you're looking for is how to bind DJI RC controller in Betaflight, okay? Now, this is for the RC2 and the O3, but the process is identical, okay? So don't let that throw you off. The process is identical, okay? That's what you got to do. All right, here goes the Super Chats. We're going to start reading Super Chats. We will return to the not Super Chats when we finish all the Super Chats. So if you would like to get your question answered now, without waiting too long, there are currently 5 Super Chats. Leave a Super Chat now, and you will get your question answered promptly. Let me remind you, by the way, before we dive into this, if you have a question, you can just email me. jb@joshuabardwell.com is my email. It's an open inbox. Anybody can email me. So I know it's fun to have me read your question on the live stream and respond in real time, but if you just want to get your question answered and you're like, well, I don't want to leave a Super Chat, just email me. Okay, here goes the Super Chats. Where is the best place to put a Radiomaster EP1 antenna on a Grinderino 3.5 with O3? Kevin J asks. Thank you for $5, Kevin J. I would put it out the back. Horizontal, out the back, on the bottom, the sort of typical place that it usually is. And then the O3 antenna would be out the top, out the back. Some people would argue that it should be out the front because, like, you get better coverage there because the front is down when you're pitched forward and the back is up. I'm not sure I agree with that, though, because, like, okay, if we put the antenna here, when I'm flying forward, it's higher in the air, and that makes it better, doesn't it? Versus if I put it in the front, now it's down. But on the other hand, if it's on the front, then when I turn around to come home, it's facing me, right? So that situation you get where you're flying away and then you turn around and you lose signal, well, that won't happen. If you really care, you could use a diversity receiver and put one on the front and one on the back. Certainly could be. I think this is the best place to do it, not because it gives best coverage, but because it is quite durable. Now, another thing you could do is you could go to Thingiverse and look up the user license to drive, and he has a whole bunch of antenna mounts for 2.4 gigahertz antennas. One of them mounts vertically on a standoff. That also could be an argument, right? But I think that if you've got, this is not a Grinderino, if you've got the O3 antenna coming out the top, then having it vertical puts it closer to the antenna. I think you want that spacing. Even a small amount of spacing can make a difference. Okay? I think that's the most durable place and survivable place for it to be. And especially on a frame like a Grinderino, when you're probably beating the shit out of it, that's what you're going to want. T.A. Christ asks, my O3 has really small range, but I can't do the FCC hack. Why can't you do the FCC hack? Do the FCC hack. T.A. Christ left me Hungarian florins, so I'm guessing you're in Hungary, and therefore you're like, I can't do the FCC hack because I live don't live in the United States. Is Hungary a European country? I think it is. Is Hungary part of the EU? It is part of the EU. Just checking. I wasn't sure. Oh, yeah, no, Hungary. Hungary's nominally part of the EU. That's where Orban is from, right? Yeah. Hungary is kind of like, oh, yeah, we're in the EU. No, we veto everything. Ha ha, suck it. So, like, legally, you can't do the FCC hack. But practically, I would never advise you to break the law. That would be foolish. I however, would observe that many European pilots are running the FCC hack with no consequences whatsoever. Now, so just want to make that observation in your direction. So what can you do to get more range? Better antennas? Aftermarket antennas, and that's about it. Frankly, without the FCC hack, the O3 gets shit range. Go ahead, Blunty.
He says, it's my brother's goggles. I didn't want to do anything to mess it up. I guarantee just doing that simple hack is just a text file. It will do nothing to mess it up.
I mean, it will mean that your brother now has the FCC hack on every DJI air unit he flies. So your brother, if you wanted the hack to only apply to your drone, so like your brother didn't get in trouble, you wouldn't do it, because undoing the hack requires hard resetting the goggles.
No, right? No.
What? No.
You just change the file, right?
No,
you just
I don't think so.
No.
No. Once they're unlocked, they're unlocked forever.
Oh, okay. On the old Goggles V2, you could just type something different in the text or a different file name. No, the ham unlock for the G2 and the G3 are just different than the old V2. That is, I remember what you're talking about. On the V2s, you unlocked the air unit. That's the other thing. The FCC unlock was on the air unit. The 1200 milliwatt unlock was on the goggles, I'm pretty sure. But on the O3, the G2, and forward, there's a single file, the ham unlock, which goes in the goggles. And once the goggles, and it makes making tutorials hard because, like, I'll do a tutorial, my goggles have been unlocked forever, and every air unit I get is already unlocked, and I have to remember to say, oh, by the way, you need to do the unlock, because I forget that mine have been unlocked forever. So, yeah. Scott Milano says, did you see the Rotorite O3, O4 range test? They seem to get much further than the 1.3 kilometers you got in your range test. Why did they get so much further? I don't know. I mean, if I remember right, they didn't have... Let me look. Oh, this old video. Hold on.
What do you think of this?
This was one of the
first drone?
Is this not the most adorable?
One of the first Rotorite videos I was ever in. And we got so much shit for this video.
Number one questions we get asked when people approach us. It's like a drone, right? Yeah. How
fun.
We're just trying to figure out how far certain drones are going to go.
What do we got?
Anyway, that was a terrible range test. We said as much, but we really had it was a good time. DJI O3 versus O4 range testing. No music, please. So their range test, they did not have the OSD. Like, how do you... Okay. As a guy who does shitty range tests, I have no room to talk, okay? But, like, when I did my last range test, I had the distance... I had a GPS, and I had the distance to home. Like, you're just doing side by side. They're flying in a random direction. Fine, that's how I do range testing. Until the last time when I improved significantly. So now I will now look down on everybody who's one step behind me, I guess. But I saw this and I was like, well, that's cool, but like it's hard to tell how far out they are. How far out are they? Did they go further than 1.3 kilometers? I have no idea. I mean, people who watched the whole video, did they say how far they went? And the other thing is, like, I can't even see the bit rate. Like, there's no, like, how are we gonna, we're just kind of, like, winging it. And that's fine. I do that, too. But, like, how can you actually do a comparison if you can't see the bit rate? It would be so easy to include the bit rate in the OSD. Why is it not there? This one here, Cricket, oh, I can almost see it, but I can't see it. They got rid of it. So, like, I don't know. I was a little disappointed, to be honest. Because it's just like we're just going to fly in a direction and we're going to see when it feels like we should turn around. And that's something. But I'm not sure I would call it... I'm not sure what I would call it. So, yeah, it started breaking up and then he flies up. We don't know anything about the terrain. Right? As soon as he punches out, now video comes back. Did he lose video because of the terrain? We just don't know. So, granted, you do a side-by-side test in identical conditions and you see who wins, and there's some value to that. But I guess I wanted more from the video than I got. Like, how far... You say they got further than 1.3 kilometers. I don't know how we know that. How far out are they? Do they say? Okay. Very first topic. I mean, I acknowledged that I had, like, a couple trees between me and the drone just because of where my house is. You know, that certainly has an effect. But there you go. Yeah, I would also like to know why I didn't get more range than I did, but... Richie's FPV says, that has to be some sort of deceit. It's so easy to put those in the OSD. It seems like it's on purpose. Frankly, as someone who has done dumb shit like this in the past, where you release a video and people are like, why didn't you do this? What are you hiding from us? In my case, it was always laziness and not malice. I can honestly say I have never released a video where I intentionally like withheld data to try to manipulate or cover up some aspect of the testing, even though I get accused of that. It is always one of two things. I stupidly didn't anticipate that it would be an issue, and then when you pointed it out, I was like, I can't believe I didn't do that. Or I was in a hurry, or I was tired, and I was like, I should really do this. Forget it. And then I got called out for it. So I don't think there's malice. I don't think there's any intent. I think it's just one of those other things. Laziness or stupidity. If a video is missing some piece of data that you think was critical. Yeah. I know exactly how these things go. You're like, hey, we need to make... It starts... Here's the thing. Anytime you're starting with the premise, I have to make a video right now, I don't know. Like that immediately that pushes you to make substandard content. However, I've been listening to the Lonely Island Seth Meyers podcast. Lonely Island, Dick in a Box, other great songs from SNL. And they talk about, SNL, every week they have to have comedy. They have to have content. So, like, it's normal that in a professional environment, even though you're a creative, every week you have to make content. At the same time, they talked about some of their sketches, and they were like, this was not our best sketch. We were scraping the bottom of the barrel, and we just needed something to pitch that week. And so we went to the bottom of the barrel, and we pitched this subpar sketch, and the sketch got on the air, and it was subpar. So you start, where does a subpar or flawed YouTube video come from? You start with that you're like, I gotta get a video out. Rather than starting with, there's this great idea for a video, and I'm going to take all the time I need to make it so that it's the best it could possibly be. You're driven by economics, by the desire to pay your bills and feed the algorithm, which is a perfectly understandable desire, but it is not the thing that produces the best content. And then you're like, you know what we're going to do? Hey, you know what would get a lot of views? O3 versus O4 range test. And then you just shit out the first thing you think of and publish it instead of saying what would make this the best possible test and the best possible content it could be. You're like, this is good enough. People will watch this. And again, I am speaking for myself. I don't want anybody to think that this is me pointing a finger at Rotoride's video. But if people are watching Rotoride's video and saying this range test could be better, it reminds me of times when I've released videos and people said this could have been better. And I know exactly how that happens to me. You go, oh, there are all these ways this video could be better. And that sounds like a lot of work and a lot of time. And I have so many other things to do today. And I kind of don't feel like doing all the hard work. And I know for a fact that if I did all the hard work, it would be 3 times as much work, and I would get 1.1% more videos, more views. So it really wouldn't pay off anyway. So I'm just going to do the thing. I'm going to tick the box. I'm going to release the content. It's good enough. And that's how a subpar video gets released, at least from my perspective. Anyway, why does Rotoride get more range than me? Because they would need to come to my house and repeat my exact test in order to really find out if there's a difference. The worst feeling as a YouTuber is the feeling that you let your audience down. And just because my audience is complaining doesn't mean I let them down. Because the audience is always going to complain about something, and you can't drive yourself crazy every time the audience complains. But when you release a video and you say, this video contains something that you very much want to see, and then you earn the viewer's click, and they start watching the video, and at the end, you half-assed it, and you thought you could get away with half-assing it, and, some people are in the comments defending you, going, whatever, it was good enough. And there's a few people who are like, you told me I was going to get X, and I didn't get X. You gave me a half-assed version that didn't get close, and you wasted my time. To me, that's one of the worst feelings. I just saw your video about the goggles. About goggles, but it was 2 years ago. What do you think is the best goggles to buy today? Asks Hakuna. Hakuna, that's a great question. I think today, if you're shopping for goggles, it used to be that you would pick your video system based on the goggles. And today, I don't think that's the case. Today, I think you should pick your video system based on the qualities of the video system and then buy the best goggles you can buy that work with that system. So the 4 video systems are Analog, HDZero, DJI, and Walksnail. And they all have different pros and cons, which would take 45 minutes to get into the deep pros and cons. Maybe I should remake that video. In short, analog is the cheapest. Analog has ultra low latency. Analog can go very long range because you can get 10-watt analog VTXs because all of the analog hardware is decades old and is just a commodity. So somebody's like, I want to make a 5-watt video transmitter. They just make it. Somebody else is like, I want to make a 10-watt video transmitter. They just make it. So analog is good for long range. It can have high power. It's inexpensive, although it can get expensive if you buy high-end stuff. Analog has the worst video quality. It's standard definition. It's like screen rolls and static, but it definitely gets the job done. Analog very good for racing as well, but very poor image quality compared to digital systems. HDZero, essentially analog on steroids. Slightly better, noticeably better image quality. Fantastic latency, great for racing, more expensive, and not quite as good for long range because they have a 1-watt video transmitter and that's it. Only HDZero makes these video transmitters, and they haven't released a 10-watt one, probably for regulatory reasons. It's not actually legal. But analog, who cares? Some Chinese company's just going to make a 10-watt video transmitter. Good luck coming after them. So HDZero not quite as good for long range because it doesn't have high output power. Great for racing. Not that great for like freestyle and general use, in my opinion, because for general use, the ultra low latency that is HDZero's real strong point, unless you're like a racer who really cares about low latency or a freestyle pilot doing really precise proximity moves, the higher latency of the other systems is still enough to get the job done, and they have other advantages in terms of image quality, range, and penetration. Say it's HDZero. Really great for racing, the choice for racing, and it's hard to think of anywhere else other than racing where HDZero is just definitively like, that's the one you should get. DJI, absolute best image quality, range, penetration, hands down. I will fight you if you disagree. There's people out there who say Walksnail has better image quality than DJI, and I'm like, are you insane? Are you okay? But that's just me. The most expensive, although not by as much as it used to be, as everything else has gotten more expensive too. The main downsides of DJI are that if you don't like what DJI gives you, screw you. You go in the restaurant and they say you can have steak or you can have chicken, and you're like, but I want fish, and they're like, sorry. They give you the steak and it's the best steak you ever ate, but you wanted fish, right? That's DJI. Bug fixes? Maybe. Sometimes. Also, sometimes they just ignore you. Feature requests? With analog and HDZero, very responsive to feature requests, bug fixes, very connected to the community, very, even Walksnail. DJI, the least of that, although some of that. And, of course, there's people who don't like DJI as a company or their political affiliations, potentially. People see ideological reasons not to buy DJI. Absolute best range, penetration, image quality, and overall user experience. But like, if you fly iNav and they didn't support the iNav OSD for years, they didn't support iNav OSD, and you were like, you might not feel so good about it. And then Walksnail, like DJI Lite, if you will, Walksnail is as good as DJI was 3 years ago. That's the way I would sum it up. Sorry, Walksnail. Walksnail has a much larger variety of cameras and video transmitters. So, for example, Walksnail has a low light camera you can use. DJI, you got one camera. That's it. Don't like it? Too bad. Suck it. Walksnail, you can choose a low light camera. You could choose all these different, you have 4K recording. There's a lot of variety in the Walksnail video transmitters and cameras that DJI doesn't have. But the performance isn't quite as good. It's almost as good. If DJI didn't exist, Walksnail would be like, the people would be like, ooh, Walksnail, you're doing great. Walksnail is like the B- student whose sibling gets A+ all the time. Walksnail comes home with their report card, and they're like, Dad, I got a B-. And Dad's like, why are you not like your son, like your brother? He got straight A's. Yeah, Blunty.
Can I say, but it's also like the B student is in extracurriculars, so the A+ student has decided to join extracurriculars as well, right? Because it's like Walksnail is kind of pushing DJI's development, right? Like,
absolutely.
You mentioned iNav OSD. DJI just patched in iNav OSD natively.
Yep.
Like, there was an update like days ago. So it's like, you know, these things do happen eventually, but I think a lot of these things would not have happened. Like 1S DJI, cheap box goggles might not have happened without Walksnail existing.
Right.
I think that's
the O4 Lite is a direct response to the Walksnail 1S video transmitter. Before the O4 Lite, DJI didn't have a 1S capable video transmitter. It was just the big heavy O3, and suck it, you get what we give you. And Walksnail, I think, pushed them to do that. Absolutely. The Goggles N3, an inexpensive box goggle for the DJI system, Walksnail pushed them to do that. I think that if you only give a shit about your user experience, you'll buy DJI. But if you care about other things, like you want to reward Walksnail for being the one to make the move first, even though they aren't quite as good. They're out there, they're listening, they're doing things like the color OSD they supported. They had a 1S VTX years ahead of DJI. They're out there, they're actually paying attention, they're doing the thing, and then 2 years later, DJI comes along and is like, oh, you guys wanted that? Okay, here. And they shit out a product that's 50% better than anything Walksnail ever did. And people are like, yeah, DJI, thank you. And Walksnail's like, do we get anything for like actually having done the work? And some people are like, yes, Walksnail, I'm not going to reward that behavior. And other people are like, I don't care. I just want a good product. And I don't really, I go both ways. I see it both ways. So that's the 4 systems. You're going to pick one of those systems. And then your choice of goggle is easy. You buy the DJI system, you're going to get the G3 or the N3. That's basically it. Or maybe the G2 or the Integra. But like you're just going to pick one. You buy Walksnail, you're going to get the Goggles X. Or maybe the Goggles L if you can't afford the Goggles X. But like, it's not which is the best goggle, it's which is the best video system for me. And then your choice of goggle is relatively small. The other thing, Render has a good point. I'll close on this. Although Walksnail absolutely deserves credit for the things that they do, they also promise way more than they deliver. Walksnail is constantly like, hey guys, we're going to do this thing. And then like, they don't do it. Or years later they do it. Like I'm thinking of the Android app for their goggles. It took over a year after their goggles were released with promise for app support to release this Android app. Maybe significantly more. I'm not sure how long it was in real life. I'm sure it was more than a year. Or they'll be like, hey guys, we're going to have an updated video system in August of 2024 that's going to have even better range and penetration. Peeps, crickets. Or they release a product and it has some flaw, like the overheating. The Goggles X overheated when they first released, and they had to do all these recalls. And to their credit, they usually get it right eventually, but like they definitely have some missteps. So nobody's perfect. All right. DJI planned obsolescence. Yeah. With DJI, you're going to get 4 or 5 years out of your hardware, and then DJI is going to stop supporting it, basically. And then you could keep using it, but if you need to buy any new hardware, you're screwed. Anyway. And it's like, and I find myself thinking, okay, Walksnail, you have this sort of moral high ground where you're making these moves, and you're doing what's good for the community, you're releasing, but like how many times are you going to like release a flawed product or say you're going to do something and then not do it before people, you burn up that goodwill and people are like, screw it, I just want a product that works, and they go buy DJI. Yeah, okay. Moving Shadow, thank you for 20 pounds. I fly the O4 in 4.3 mode. Is there a way to superview the image like you could do on the Vista? Superview the image? Like in the goggles? Was there a WTFOS plugin that like stretched the image? No. In short, no. If you mean like in post, can I do it? Like you could stretch it like in Premiere or Resolve or something, sure. Like there's post-processing things you can do with your footage to stretch it, but nothing in the goggles. Tegrity Frank says, thank you so much for the quad instant flips during takeoff video. I'd kiss you if you were on the same continent right now. I'm glad I'm not on the same continent. That's okay, though. Really appreciate your quality content. Thank you for 12 euros, Tegrity Frank. Tibor Puskas says, thank you for your donation. Thank you for 1,000 Hungarian florins. FPV Candy, thank you for $5. Why does my DBM sometimes drop to minus 150, but the LQ and the megabits per second are still solid? Negative 130 is 0. That's the minimum of the DBM scale, basically. But if the DBM drops out and LQ is solid, obviously the DBM didn't drop out. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. It must be a glitch in your telemetry, because the LQ would go to 0 if your DBM dropped. It feels like normally to go to minus 130 means you fail-safed. I don't have a good answer for you there. Yeah.
If it's just jumping instantly down to like minus 150 and back up to like minus 80 or something, that does seem like some kind of display bug, possibly. Maybe with the OSD translation to voxnail, something like that. One way you can confirm for sure is to look at the telemetry on your radio. Mm-hmm. So if you go into the radio and compare the RSSI DBM, that RQLY, is that right? RQLY value? No, that's link quality.
Would be link quality. It would be RSSI, RSSI 1 or something.
Yeah,
one RSS. One RSS.
There you go. One RSS. That's the value you want to look at in your radio, and compare that one RSS with the RSSI DBM in your OSD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Okay. Luca Pivic, thank you for 10 euros. I've sent you an email describing my issue with the TBS Crossfire Nano RX. Okay, Luca. Let's have a look, my friend. Let's have a look. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Here we go. Luca says, I'm having an issue with my TBS Crossfire Nano RX. My receiver and controller lose signal mid-flight. In the first video, it was still connected for about 2 seconds after signal loss. The throttle is moving at the bottom of the video. Well, if you are in GPS Rescue, iNav will show the auto throttle, which is the throttle it's commanding. That doesn't mean your throttle is moving. We'll take a look. The red LED stays, then green blinks for 0.0 disconnected. When the green LED blinks, it reconnects. It's not a soldering issue. Okay, let's take a look. No sound. Okay. Press the receiver down, but it's not touching. Green LED. Wait, why did the lights on the flight controller go off? Look at the flight controller lights right here. Why did the flight controller lights go off? What's happening to the flight controller? What's happening to my video? Hang on. No, that's a problem. This is a SpeedyBee. These lights are the battery voltage indicator on the SpeedyBee. Blunty, am I crazy here?
I just don't know what they normally do. I don't own.
Well, they don't flash. They go 1, 2, 3, 4 based on the battery voltage. So that's weird. I think your flight controller or 5-volt regulator has a problem or something. Your flight controller is glitching out. Yeah, it's going into failsafe, as I would expect. This isn't giving us any new information. It is going into failsafe. The thing that jumps out to me the most is that your flight controller lights are going off.
Is it possible that he didn't have battery plugged in? Like, so is that a USB thing that might happen on USB?
Maybe, but like, I don't have an overhead camera to show you, but like, Here, let's check. I have a speedy right here. No, the VBAT lights don't light up from USB. You can see right here. So those VBAT lights mean battery is plugged in. And then it like glitched out. That's that. You have a problem with your flight controller, in my opinion. Max FPV says, on mine the lights blink. What do they blink? Why do they blink? Hang on. Let's get a battery. Hold on. Where's the battery? Here's a battery. Where's my smoke stopper? Anytime you're playing. What's that?
Yaros and Max both say it happens on their V3 on USB power.
I'm sorry. This is a V3. It's not happening.
There's two people in chat who claim theirs is.
I mean, that may be true, but I can 100% tell you that's not happening for me. Is this Betaflight? Have I got iNav on it? No, it's Betaflight. This is Betaflight. I mean, that shouldn't be controlled by Betaflight anyway. That's a hardware thing. But it clearly does not power up. The LEDs do not power up on the V3.
Yeah. We got a vid from Yaros showing it does happen on his, so it may be just be specific to like the batch or something.
Or he says V4? Well, people say a lot of things, Blunty. I'm gonna alligator clip this with a smoke stopper and see what happens. I don't think they flash under any circumstances.
An F7 V3.
Oh, this is an F4. Which does he have? Which does my friend have? Does he have the what flight controller? Maybe the F7 does it and the F4 doesn't. Does Luca have the F4 or the F7? I can't see from the video. It's too blurry.
Luca says it's a V4.
Okay, so that could be different as well.
It's an F405 V4. Yeah.
Luca, did you have battery plugged in there or was it powered from USB? Let's just ask him. He's right here. We don't need to guess. But anyway, here's the thing. Why are they blinking? It looks to me like the flight controller is powering down. And it's like they're synced up. As soon as the receiver starts blinking, the flight controller starts blinking too. Right? That's not a coincidence, guys. Like, yeah, he does have USB plugged in. He does not have a battery plugged in. Okay, we can see that. Okay, so there we go. The answer was in front of us the whole time while we're trying to be fucking detectives. Okay? But, like, this is not a coincidence. Look. Solid light. Light. Did it turn off there? Oh. This is not a coincidence. I don't know what's happening here, but the flight controller is having an issue at the same time as the receiver does, so I think the flight controller is the issue. It's like the 5-volt power or something. Okay, that's the direction I would steer you, and I think that's as much time as we're going to devote to this right now. We would want to explain why the flight controller started blinking at the same time that your receiver started glitching out. Are you short-circuiting the 5-volt pad, for example? I don't know. Every time I power up the drone, I have to wait for this blinking cycle to end before it connects. Have you enabled encryption? That's the other thing. Disable encryption if you enabled encryption. That adds some complexity to binding and connecting that could be screwing you up. I don't know why it would cause that problem in flight, though. All right. Thank you for €5 from Irification. Irification says, I've got an Integra and DJI controller. Which drone would you consider the best option to practice backyard flying without going bankrupt due to damages? For backyard flying, that's tough. You probably don't want a 5-inch for backyard flying. So we'd be looking at like The Integra can be used with the O4 Lite. Maybe like the Pavo Pico or the Pavo 2.0. Do they come with the O4 yet? I'm not sure about that. The Flywoo Flylens 80... Oh my God, hiccups today. Flywoo Flylens 85 could be a choice. It comes with the O4 Lite. Ooh. Flybe 16 HD. This could be a really fun little backyard. I would prefer 2-inch to 1.6-inch for the backyard, but the 1.6 is still good. Look at this little guy. Oh, I like that. That seems fun. O4 2S. That's the O4 Lite, not the O4 Pro. Yeah. I mean, that's the direction I would steer you. There's a Flybe 2.0. There you go. The Pavo Femto comes with the O4. Pavo Femto. Is that a 2-inch? What is that? How big is that? Oh, there you go. That looks a little more durable for backyard flying. The Pavo Femto. There you go. 75 millimeter. 1.6-inch. Yeah. This is going to be a little less agile, but a little more durable, depending on what you're looking for. Very nice. Subuzek Chef. Oh, wow. I can't read Polish. Sorry. Thank you for 25 Polish zloty. Looking now for the best analog goggles with OLED. Do you think the Sky O4 X Pro? The Sky O4 X Pro would be my choice for a pure analog goggle. I go back and forth between the Sky O4 X Pro and the HDZero goggles. I will tell you that whenever I'm making content, I use the HDZero goggles because the HDZero goggle DVR is the best. The HDZero goggle DVR will record audio, which makes syncing the files easy because I can sync based on the audio. I don't have to be like, take one, do like hand signals to indicate what take it is. I just say, okay, I just start talking and sync based on the audio. The other thing is that when the video gets glitchy and signal gets weak, HDZero does not drop frames. The DVR stays in sync, whereas every other DVR, well, I shouldn't say every, but most, if not every other DVR, when the video gets glitchy, it loses frames, and so the video will start in sync and go out of sync. So as a content creator, the HDZero goggles for analog are what I use every time. But personally, when I fly analog, a lot of times I'll pull the Sky Zones out. I think it's a comparable experience in a lot of ways, and they're smaller, lighter, and less expensive. Martin L. Zingre, continuing the super chats. Thank you for $20, Martin. I have a Pavo Pico 03. I just replaced the whole system except the 03. It loses ELRS signal in about 25 feet. The radio works fine with other ELRS quads. Yeah, I mean, it has to be the receiver at that point, right? Damaged antenna would be my first guess. 25 feet is just unacceptable. What you're going to want to do is do the bench test. The ELRS bench test. And just search for ELRS bench test and find this before first flight and here bench test. And then do this test, and that will confirm for you that you have a damaged receiver. Probably. If the bench test passes, then I have no idea how you're fail-safing at 25 feet. But I suspect the bench test won't pass, and that will confirm you have a damaged receiver or receiver antenna. Costa Z, thank you for €5. I just built my analog drone and want to record cinematic videos. Should I switch to digital or get a GoPro? That's a tough question. If all you care about is recording good quality cinematic footage, you can do that on analog with a GoPro. People did it for years. But there, as an FPV pilot, you will get a very nice experience going from analog to the DJI O4 Pro. So the quality of your cinematic footage will be slightly better with a GoPro. I think a GoPro has better. It has a smaller sensor than the O4 Pro, oddly. I got that wrong in a video. I guess I assumed that it was a bigger sensor. It's not. But I still think that the color science of the GoPro and the exposure and so forth is better. I'm not sure why, given that it has a smaller sensor. I guess there's more to life than just sensor size. Size isn't everything, I guess is what I'm saying. But the quality of the image on the O4 is still good enough that many people consider it acceptable for like professional cinematic purposes. So if all you care about is getting cinematic footage, then get the GoPro. But if you have the budget to switch to the O4, I think that's going to give you a much better experience overall in terms of you as an FPV pilot than analog. Aerial Insight, thank you for $10. Do you think Brother Hobby 2810 1500 kV motors and 7.5-inch props would work on an AOS UL8 Cinelifter? Yeah, those motors seem okay for 7.5-inch props. 28 millimeter is good for 7-inch props. A lot of 7-inch and 7.5-inch builds these days will go to maybe 29 millimeter motors, maybe a little bigger, but they're okay. There's no question that they're okay. Yeah, I think it would work fine. CJ Hanna says, I'm just getting back into FPV. I've been out since 2020. I would like to install the O4 Lite in my 5 inches. I have switched to Crossfire. Will the O4 Lite be a viable option? I have the G3. CJ, I would strongly advise you to use the O4 Pro in your 5 inches. The O4 Lite has some serious drawbacks, the main one being that the camera is inferior to the O4 Pro, both in terms of image quality, which is okay, it's good, but the O4 Pro is better, and field of view. The field of view on the O4 Lite is narrow enough that it's not unusably low, but it's annoying, and the O4 Pro is better. The only reason to choose the O4 Lite is that your drone isn't big enough to carry the O4 Pro, and a 5 inch is more than big enough to carry the O4 Pro. I think that's what you should use. The O4 Pro is going to be, $100 more expensive, fair, but I really feel like you're hamstringing yourself if you use the O4 Lite. The other thing is that your frame may not be able to mount the O4 Pro, so. In which case you may need to do the O4 Lite. Kebab suggested using the O4 Lite on a 5 inch. Well, I just disagree. I disagree. So price no object, which obviously price is always an object. The O4 Pro is hands down better in every way. Better image quality, more output power, better field of view. The only reason to choose the Lite is that it's smaller and lighter, and your quad is too small. I would always take the Pro every time if I could afford the money. And frankly, the field of view on the Lite is annoying enough when you start trying to do, if you're just doing casual flying, it's okay, but if you start trying to do proximity stuff or racing, it really makes a big difference, even for a guy like me who isn't that fast of a racer. Would you say the HDZero goggles are the most versatile, more now that they can do HDMI in recording? Richie's FPV says. Did they add HDMI recording now? When did that happen? That's nice. Can do widescreen analog. That's cool. Low latency HDMI display. We know that. automatically record HDMI in. Interesting. That's cool. That's a cool feature. That's a cool feature. That people are going to use that. It's always better if you're doing like a Walksnail standalone VRX. It's always better to record DVR on the VRX because it's not going to re-encode the signal. And so you'll get the same quality in your DVR as you will in the goggles. However, the advantage of the HDMI in recording is that it'll record the whole screen. You don't need to do any jacking around with OSD. Frankly, I would be tempted to use the HDZero goggles to record my Walksnail screen instead of using the Walksnail DVR and the OSD tool. However, it would depend on the bit rate, because if the HDZero DVR is going to reduce the quality of the Walksnail of the image, then it wouldn't be fair to use that in a video. So I probably can't do that. But that's great. Today's the day, Bardwell. Signing up to Patreon. Thank you so much, Squirrely. Have you ever been injured by a quad? If not, have you had any close calls? Yeah, I've had a couple close calls. Thank you for $5, close call FPV. Twice in my life, I've armed a quadcopter while I was holding it by accident. Once was years ago. I had all my stuff bundled up in my arms. The quadcopter was still plugged in. I accidentally hit the arm switch. I did not get hurt. It did. The propeller hit my hand with the top of the propeller. And so it kind of just went whop, 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 and slapped my hand away instead of cutting me. I got very lucky. And then once I had the quad in my hand and literally I just brain farted and flipped the arm switch before I was ready to set it down. It didn't just accidentally hit the switch. My brain went, it's time to hit the arm switch now, and my finger followed suit. And I just kind of let it go, and it went and flew away. And I was like, I meant to do that. But no, for the most part, I have not. The closest thing I've come to being injured by a quad is when I burned my fingers soldering. Anyway, that's it. We're caught up on the super chats. Yay. Now it's time to go back to the regular chats. Micah Jorgensen says, I have a Radiomaster Pocket and I want to get the Caddx GoFilm 2.0 with the Goggles L. Is that a good first setup? I liked the Caddx GoFilm a lot. I was really impressed with it. I think the Goggles L are a solid budget Walksnail goggles. Assuming you've decided that Walksnail is the ecosystem you want to be in, then that's a fine choice, I would say. Brooks Coleman says, I'd like to suggest that someone develop a goggle with a built-in simulator. How does that... the idea is that computers are expensive. So, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It would be better to develop a mobile simulator, which, by the way, already exists. There are mobile simulators for Android and iOS. That's the direction you should go. A goggle with a built-in sim, it's going to be a shitty goggle and or a shitty simulator. I mean, the display device, there's no reason that the display device should be the thing running the simulator. What you want is an inexpensive device that can run a simulator so you can fly sim without having to buy a computer. Okay, gotcha. That's a valid request, but there's no reason to assume that means it needs to be in the goggles. Route FPV, does Velocidrone run on phones? Velocidrone just dropped a sim for mobile. Oh, that's the new video Evan Turner made. Oh, yeah, that's hot. I got to get that. And then whatever device you have, you can pipe it into your goggles via HDMI, probably. My controller won't connect to my phone. Well, that's because you run iOS. If you run Android, that's not an issue. Sorry you picked an inferior operating system. Ooh, you like that? Yes. Crown Nut says, I'm filming a wedding inside of a large building and I'm afraid I may not get any GPS lock. Yeah, how does that work? How does remote ID work if you're inside a building with the Avata? Does it let you fly without GPS lock? Can you just say, I'm indoors? Probably not. Good question. Anybody know the answer? Why do you need GPS inside? Because the Avata won't fly if it can't remote ID. And without GPS, it can't remote ID. And you don't need remote ID indoors. So should you be able to say, hey, Avata, I'm indoors. The FAA doesn't apply here. But they won't let you do that, obviously, because then everybody would just do that. But the Avata surely can fly indoors, right? So how's that work? Brand, everybody says they can fly the Avata indoors. Does it get GPS lock? SWB says you can fill out a form and unlock it for a set time. Start outdoors, then fly indoors. Yes, that would work. Technically, you shouldn't need a GPS lock if you're flying indoors, though. I'm surprised people are saying they've taken off with 0 satellites. Blunty, a standard remote ID drone should not let you take off without sat lock and remote ID functional, right?
That is not correct.
No? Tell me.
The way the law is written says that I don't know. It's just really stupid. But the way the law is written, there are 2 bylines that allow anything you want, basically, because of how they're written. Basically, It says if you're in a GNSS canyon or indoors, you can disable the ability for them to need a GPS lock. So that basically means at any time you can disable it because the drone doesn't know any better. So that means you would never have to have a lock for remote ID. So standard RD doesn't even make any fucking sense. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just really dumb. But yes, technically the paid document that you can only read if you pay, the standards document says that if you're in a GNSS canyon or indoors, you can approve the remote ID signal without a GNSS lock.
Does DJI give you the ability to do that with the Avata?
I have no idea, but if people can fly indoors and without 0 satellites, it sounds like that's just doing it. Right?
All right, great. So if someone, well, you'd need to do it on the goggles too, also, because the goggles have GPS. If someone wanted to, it sounds like they could disable the antenna on their GPS. They could damage or cut the antenna on the GPS receiver in the goggles and the drone, and then remote ID would not be able to function and they would have no change to their normal functionality, is what it sounds like. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm tired of
the... Almost as if they wrote the rules poorly.
Yes, well, that's a fact. You know, for all the problems with regulatory bodies like the FAA, I'm tired of the buzzword unelected. Okay? I'm tired of it. I don't want elected officials making regulations. We talked about this when the Supreme Court did the frickin' Chevron deference case. You know, I think the structure where an elected body that is accountable to their constituents, we're in fantasy land already. I think the model where elected representatives pass a law saying, we authorize the government to regulate clean water, the airspace, whatever, and then experts in the field decide how to implement that. I think that's a great model. And I'm not saying that the way we do it now doesn't have problems. It clearly does. But the model itself, I think, makes sense. Because have you seen how little our elected representatives know about the nuts and bolts of anything other than getting reelected. That's what they're good at. They're good at campaigning and raising money to get reelected, and not much else. I mean, some of them are lawyers or doctors or whatever, and they're probably good at that. But the representative who votes that on principle we want clean air, clean water, protected workers being protected from dangerous workplaces, all these regulatory things, the representative votes that we should do that. And then they should get the hell out of the way because, hey, how many ppm of this carcinogen are okay to be in the water? Well, the great state of Tennessee feels that it's 1 part per million. Well, what's that based on? I don't know. They don't know shit about the things they regulate. So yes, absolutely, unelected bureaucrats should be making these decisions as long as they're experts and not just like, well, my friend who's a millionaire gave a big campaign contribution and now he's going to head the EPA and he also doesn't know shit about clean air and water and he's going to just jack around. I don't like this idea, oh, you're unelected, so you're illegitimate. You can't elect everyone who's going to run the government. That's not how it should work. It can't possibly work that way. But we just look at something we don't like and then go, well, how can I discredit this? I know, you weren't elected. Ah, well, there you go. Anyway. Yeah. All right, and then there's a can of worms there. Should the federal government even be regulating these things? Why don't we leave it to the states? We're not going to go there. I would much rather an unelected bureaucrat who is an expert in the field make these decisions. Because I've seen what happens when politicians try and make these decisions, and it's a goddamn mess. Of course, the unelected bureaucrats aren't doing much better. As we saw, the FAA has these stupid regulations. So I don't know. You can't win. But in principle, I would rather try to find unelected bureaucrats who will make good decisions than throw it back to the representatives. These SOBs, their whole job is to pass laws, and they can't do that. So why would we think they could pass regulations? Anyway.
I would just point out
yes,
quickly that one of the issues with this is that if you consider who has time and money to go sit up there and help. Okay, this is the problem. The people who are professionals in fields don't have the time and money to do this.
The actual experts.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
So the people you get, and also people on recreational aren't getting paid and can't do this, right? So, so people for the common man don't get to do this. So the reason you see commercial interests get pushed and commercial changes happen and big money people get in there is because that's who can afford to be there, that's who people pay to be there, and that's who wants the things to change, so that's why they're there. Yeah. And that's just something I've seen from a drone level is like, there's nobody out there to represent recreational. All the stores haven't gotten to, it matters for all the stores, but all the stores aren't getting together and making a conglomerate and going to lobby the FAA, right? It doesn't matter enough to them, right? And that's the thing to point out is like the commercial interests for the recreational side are not there. So you're not going to get bureaucrats, regardless of who they are, to go up there and do any work, to do anything. That's just another piece of this, right? It's like, I agree with what you're saying, but if you elected those people in such a way as that people could have a reason to be there, then that's sort of the other side of it, right? But again, I don't know that that's possible. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just pointing out that piece.
Yeah. Yep. Good point. Good. Yeah. Anyway. Tibor says, how much less capable is the Radiomaster Pocket compared to the TX16S or the Boxer? Honestly, man, is the Pocket 100 milliwatts or 250 milliwatts? The TX16S is 250 milliwatts. The Boxer is 1 watt. The difference between 250 milliwatts and 1 watt is 4 times the power, is about double the range. So the Boxer can be expected to get about 2x the range of the TX16S, and people are telling me the Pocket is also 250 milliwatts. The Boxer will get about twice the range because it has 4 times the output power as the Pocket and the TX16S. So that's an answer. The EU Pocket is 100 milliwatts, as says Pathogenics. Good point. You could always just get an aftermarket module, though. Is it worth it for me to build my own 7-inch cruiser or just buy a bind and fly? Anthony Fraschetti, the bind and flies are very good. The question is if you want to build something that doesn't exist in a bind and fly, you want a particular, motor KV or something. I think that the bind and flies are often cheaper than building it yourself. Even if you pay yourself for your own labor, they often come out cheaper. Especially if you pay yourself for your own labor, because they buy in bulk and they build in bulk. So, yeah, if you can find a 7-inch cruiser that does what you want, compare it to the price of buying the parts separately, and you probably should just go ahead and buy it. What's your opinion on the HDZero box goggles, asks Seth. They're amazing. We talked about them on a previous live stream, Blunty. Wait a minute. What is this? Joshua Bardwell, film producer, is a suggested result. I am, in fact, a producer. I was the executive producer on the Flow State film. What do we got? Joshua Bardwell, film producer. I feel like that shouldn't be my credit. Are Joshua Bardwell videos good? Am I just getting paid to say so? Did I reply to this? I can't see if I replied to this. Oh, I did. Oh, I was just correcting somebody who said something inaccurate. Yeah, okay, anyway. If we go to the live stream clips channel, this is where Blunty cuts up my live streams and puts them into clips. If you're not subscribed, you totally should be subscribed. Joshua Bardwell live stream clips. Blunty posted a link to the video. Is it? There it is. HDZero Box Pro. You can see a 11-minute reaction to the HDZero box goggles where I go into all the pros and cons and my thoughts about them. You should definitely check that out over on the live stream clips channel. Short version, I think they're awesome. I don't like AI, Sunshine. Your message is upsetting me. I'm going to get rid of that. I don't like that message. Are you sure you want to delete this message? It's creeping me out. I'm deleting that message. Let's see here. I tuned my PIDs and filters. Now I have trilling oscillations, but the motors are cold. Ask me if the tune is the real reason, because the motors are cold. Trilling oscillations, I mean, you changed the PID tune, now you have trilling oscillations. Obviously, the PID tune is the cause of the trilling oscillations, right? That just makes sense. I wouldn't be okay with it even if the motors are cold. I would back off the D term a little bit. Evil Genius FPV says, I fly 533 rates for smoothness and it works for me, but my muscle memory from the last few years for snap rolls is close to 900 because I started there years ago. Is there a middle ground? Yeah, you could make the curve be 900 at the end and closer to 533 in the middle. It'll just have a steep elbow, but that could be okay. What I would suggest is, hang on. Hello? USB? What I would suggest is this. So, okay, we're not. Let me load the 533 rates. So here's our 533 rates. Is it actual rates? No, hold on. Go back to presets. I need to load the actual rates. 533 racing rates, we're going to do the actual rates because actual rates are easier to tweak. Okay, so here's 533 rates, but converted to actual rates so they're easier to tweak. Hello, please to connect. And then we go to rate profile settings. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave the center sensitivity the same, and we're going to raise the max rate to 900. That's the power of actual rates. And that is going to leave the center more or less the same. Right? Okay, so now look, if you look right here, here's our 533 rates, right? And here's your rates with 900 at the end. Okay? So now what you could do is you could be like, you know what? Do you see that these are mostly the same up to about 25%, and then they start to diverge? Now, if you don't like that, what I can do is I can say I can add more expo. Now watch what happens as I add expo. Do you see that it flattens out that curve? There we go. So now by adding some expo, now we're overlaying the 533 line up to about 60% of the stick travel, and then whoosh. And what you can do is you can adjust that, okay? So basically, load your 533 rates, load them as actual rates, leave the center sensitivity the same, set the max rate to 900, and then tweak the expo to basically adjust the transition point where no longer are you having 533 rates. And if I keep going, well, eventually it gets under the line, right? It starts to change. Yeah. But like, to me, I feel like this is about where I would be. I have 533 rates up to half throttle, and then I transition to 900 degrees per second. That's about where I would be. All right. We got a super chat here from Sohali Sen, who's asking for recommendations on an O4 light. Whoop. We just did this. But you probably weren't here and you super chatted, so we'll do it again. We thought the Pavo Femto was worth considering. The Flylens 85 O4 Pro. Ooh, that's going to be heavy, but okay. Here's a Flylens 85 with the O4 Pro. That's not what you asked for. What does Flywoo got with the O4? O4 Pro. No, I want to bind and fly. Here we go. Flylens 85. Here's the Flylens 85 with the O4 Lite. That's a very good choice. I've liked the Flylens 85 in the past. Those are some to consider. McShaky FPV. The issue is that you are using... McShaky FPV says, my GX12 arm switch is 3 position, but when I go in the middle position, the Betaflight mode slider goes all the way to the right. I'm going to guess you're using ExpressLRS. ExpressLRS requires your arm channel to be channel 5 aux 1, and that channel is always 2 position in ExpressLRS. It is never not 2 position. That channel is only used for arming and can only be 2 positions. So that is probably what's happening there. If those assumptions are wrong, you tell me. Okay. So the question is, what are you trying to do with a 3-position arm switch? Because armed is it's you're either armed or disarmed, right? So what are you trying to do? Like, you can do 3rd position return to home. Yeah, no problem. What you want to do is set up arming logic. So you're going to use source equals max, and then you're going to do max 100 or minus 100, and basically make it so that the up position is disarmed and the middle and down position are armed. Actually, that's already what's happening, isn't it? So you're good to go. He wants the third position to be returned to home. That's fine. The third position... Oh, I see your problem. Okay. Right. Okay. What you're going to need is, you're going to need 2 sets of logic on 2 different channels. Channel 5 is going to be your arm disarm, and channel 6 is going to be your return to home. Both of that is going to be based on the same switch, but channel 5 is going to be just arm and disarm, and channel 6 is going to be return to home when the switch is in the down position. No problem. I would really hesitate to overload your arm switch with another function, because you're going to be in GPS rescue, and then you're going to take it out of GPS rescue, and you're accidentally going to disarm, and the quad's going to fall out of the sky. To me, that seems like a bad idea. I have my arming on a 3 position, but here's what I do with it. Disarm, arm with ExpressLRS at 10 milliwatts, arm with ExpressLRS at 1 watt. And the idea is that if I'm on the bench, I can arm and not go to full power. But then when I'm flying, it's always at 1 watt. And if I come back, it's always disarm. It's always all the way to disarm. I wouldn't put GPS rescue on the arm switch. To me, that seems like a bad idea. Is that configured on the radio or in Betaflight? On the radio. Ooh, a new goggle for me to poop on. What do you think of the goggle named SJRGO1? Well, that existed in 2018. I think it's an old goggle that probably was shitty when it was old, and now is not only shitty but also ancient. So yeah, don't buy it. That's what I'm going to say. Oh, 480 by 20 pixel screen. Yeah, no. We could do better. Anybody know of any DIY digital goggle builds? $500 for a pair of goggles is way too high for me. No, not really. Like, the closest you would come would be to buy a standalone, like, walk-snail receiver, and then rig up some kind of a display via the HDMI input. But the problem is that HDMI inputs that are not optimized for FPV typically have 16 milliseconds or more of latency, and that is undesirable for FPV. FPV goggles that have HDMI inputs usually optimize the HDMI input to be, 1 to 5 milliseconds of latency. They minimize the latency. If not, then they're not suitable for purpose. You're not going to find an off-the-shelf HDMI input that will have the latency required. There's a reason that FPV goggles are $500. When you try to make one on your own, you will see why they're $500. You will not save money making one on your own. That's my opinion. They're not ripping you off. They're selling them as cheap as they can sell them, and they have economies of scale and mass production. Obviously, they need to make a profit so that they can stay in business, right? So you'd think you could save money, but you won't. Like, yeah, you won't. Probably. Forest27 says, I've been working on your How to Fly series, and I had a question about how you grip the radio. When the radio's on the desk, do you use pinch grip, or does it just sit on your desk? When I'm flying simulator and the radio's on my desk, I'm holding it pretty much the same as I hold it in the air. Like, when I'm in the air, I would wrap my fingers around the back a little bit more, and I would pinch, okay? Right. So this is how I would hold it in the air. Pinched, Fingers on the top, fingers wrapped around the back. When it's on the desk, I don't wrap the fingers around the back. So when it's on the desk, it's more like this. But this side is basically the same. Boxer, same deal. Anthony Marsh says, friend just got an HDZero 75mm with the all-in-one board. Every time he lands or bumps something, his receiver signal is lost. He has to power cycle the quad before it reconnects. That's bad. I think you should reach out to HDZero support. I would be exploring whether I have a defective flight controller with HDZero support and exploring whether I deserved a replacement. I'm not saying you do, and I'm not saying you deserve a replacement. Don't go to them and say, Bardwell said you need to give me a new flight controller, please. But, like, it's got a built-in receiver. So, like, it's not like the receiver's losing power, right? And you didn't say the whole flight controller reboots, so it's not like it's a battery problem. So... Momo Zavur says, I recently made my own flight controller, but the IMU and flash on the custom Betaflight target didn't work. A Betaflight dev in their Discord tried helping me, but nothing worked, so he gave up. Should I also give up? My guy, if I'm not going to tell you to give up, but I am going to tell you that if a Betaflight dev tried to help you and it didn't work, then I feel like I don't know where else you're going to get more help that could solve it for you. So I'm not telling you to give up, but I am saying you're probably at a dead end unless you can find another dev who like knows what you've done wrong. Part of the problem is that Betaflight dev can try and help you with the code, but if you designed your own flight controller and you made the PCB, it's going to be hard to find mistakes in your PCB, and maybe that's why it's not working. I certainly am not the guy to help you. Good luck. A few weeks ago, I crashed my drone, and now all the motors are spinning except for one. It's super stiff. What happened? Two things could have happened. Number one, the motor could have been damaged. Like literally the motor shaft got bent or the bell got deformed, and it's rubbing on the magnets. That's likely what's happened when you say it's super stiff. However, it could also be the ESC. To find out if it's the ESC, desolder all the wires from the ESC. If you desolder the wires and the motor suddenly loosens up again, that means the ESC is damaged. If the motor is stiff, even after you loosen up the wires, it's likely the motor is damaged and you replace the motor. What's the normal internal resistance of a battery? Blunty, do we have a live stream clip about this? I know I've discussed this recently. One of my favorite things about the Joshua Bardwell live stream clips channel is that I can just go search for topics I've talked about on live streams, bingo, and find answers. I'm like, I know I talked about this on a live stream. I don't have a video about this. And boom, I find the answer. How do I know what proper internal resistance is for my LiPo batteries? The answer is, ooh, I had the lights off today. Dark room. Must have been feeling moody. The answer is that there is no single internal resistance that is correct for a battery. There are many things that affect internal resistance, and you need to take those into account. And you can watch this video for more information about that. This is actually, you know what? This is a better video. What should a new FPV LiPo's internal resistance be? That's a better video. You should watch that one. Oh God, I've answered this question many times. This is the one that I remember answering, and I think it's the best, most detailed answer. And it is, how long is this video? 11 minutes. Yeah, watch this video. What should a new FPV LiPo's internal resistance be? Do I trash them if it's wrong? Okay. Richie says, have you seen the new... Oh, we got that already. Crom says, when can we see more freestyle videos like the last one you posted? I don't know. I'm glad you liked it. Caveman Ariel says, I'm getting jello in my footage on my new AOS 7 build. The camera is soft mounted. It seems to be worse on throttle. Could it be from the tune? I'm using Chris Rosser's preset. If you suspect that it's the tune, then just switch PID profiles. Go to the PID tuning tab, change PID profiles from 1 to 2 or whatever, and now you're back at Betaflight defaults and see if the problem goes away. Very, very simple process of elimination there. You don't want to go jacking around with the PID tune because it's complicated, but if you just switch the PID profile, you could go back without any issue. So that's a simple way to test that. JB, I got an FCC Radiomaster Pocket with a Radiomaster ELRS receiver. Can I run it with LBT? You can. You may need to reflash the Pocket with LBT firmware. Or it may, I think you have to reflash to go to LBT. Can anybody confirm or deny? Is there a, I know that in 900 megahertz, you can change the region. Hang on, can we test this? I know in 900 megahertz, you can change the region just by going into the web UI. Can you change LBT and EU without flashing, or do you have to flash? Give me a second, and we'll see if this receiver, oh, sorry. I'm hearing that it's flashing only. We'll take a look. I think it's flashing only. We have to wait for this receiver to go into Wi-Fi mode, though. LBT is listen before talk, and it's used in the 2.4 gigahertz band in Europe. It basically means that the ELRS system has lower output power. That's the short version. Has anybody found a source for O4 Pro sized lens filters? Avada 2 filters work on the O4 Pro. That's my understanding. Any update on the 200 mile an hour drone? Asked Luke Stearman. I have not gotten back to that, Luke. I got sad that there's no legal way for me to show you guys that drone flying 200 miles an hour. You could theoretically get a waiver to go over 100 miles an hour, but it's not. Number one, the process of filling out the paperwork, the waiver, writing the waiver, here's how it works. You write a waiver application where you say to the FAA, I should be allowed to break the rules. And here's why it's okay for me to break the rules. And the FAA has certain things they want to see in that waiver application, but they're not going to tell you what they are. So you submit your waiver application and they go, okay, box tick, box tick. Oh, didn't tick these boxes. I didn't even know the boxes existed. Maybe I would have ticked the boxes, but I didn't know they cared about that. The FAA only wants you to fly over 200 miles an hour, over 100 miles an hour on a Tuesday. Well, I was going to do it on a Tuesday, but I didn't think to put that in the report because I didn't know you cared. Ah, sorry, waiver denied. And the whole process of submitting the waiver and waiting to get it takes like 90 days. So like, you submit the waiver, and then maybe you hear back from them, maybe you don't. Within 90 days, they come back and they go, sorry, your waiver application was rejected. And it's not even like they go, here's the things you need. They're not going to give you the answers to the test. They're not going to like help you figure out how to get the waiver. That's not their job. They just go, nope, waiver denied. And you're like, well, flip. And it's a matter of public record. The waivers are a matter of public record. So I can see that in the last 2 years, there have been 7 waivers, or however many. I don't know the exact number is single digits. There have been 7 waivers where the FAA let people go over 200 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour. Can you read their waiver application? No. So I can't even crib somebody else's work. And I was talking to Vic Moss. Vic Moss is an expert on FPV and drone legal stuff. And he said he's working on a waiver application. I don't remember exactly what he's working on a waiver for. It's tens of hours to write the waiver application, to research it and figure out, and maybe even more than 100 hours. It just depends on to figure out how to write the waiver application in such a way that you get it approved. So this company who wrote a waiver and had it approved, they're not just going to say, hey, everybody, here's how I wrote the waiver application. Here are the things I did that got my waiver approved. You got to say, I'm doing it on a Tuesday. I'm going to be wearing an orange shirt, and I'm going to make sure that I sing God Bless America before I fly. And if you say those things, then the FAA will approve your waiver. Except in reality, it would be, I'm not doing it near people. I have controlled airspace. I'm maintaining visual line of sight and other things that we don't know about. If anybody out there has an over 100 mile an hour waiver and is willing to share their waiver application with me so that I can crib it and figure out how to get my waiver approved, that would be great. But they don't do that. Maybe they'll do it for me because I'm special. But generally, this information is not out there. You just have to figure it out. And I got really discouraged. Now, obviously, I could take that drone and I could go outside and I could fly at 300 kilometers an hour anytime I want. I just can't show that to you because I'm a giant wimp. And if I were a real man, the government, and I would do what I want. And I'd say, come get me, you fools. Except that would be stupid. That would be stupid. I can't afford to do that my entire career. If the FAA comes after me and finds, like if there was something that I thought was really worth standing up for, I would just eat the fine. I would GoFundMe the fine, but like this isn't that thing, right? So anyway, I got really discouraged, and I haven't put the 200 mile an hour drone back in the air again because of that. And I was like, what if I went to Mexico? Like, really, legitimately. Like, I'm not saying just, oh, look, I'm in Mexico, quote unquote. What if I went to a foreign country and did it? And I was like, I don't know. It's dumb. Thank you for asking. Nitro FPV, thank you for 35 South African Rand. Nitro wants me to look at this product that Nitro FPV is the manufacturer of or representative of. So this is in some ways a paid advertisement, although for 35 South African Rand, I feel like you're getting more than your money's worth. Normally a product plug would cost more than that. It is interesting, though. A VTOL aircraft, VTOL fixed-wing transition aircraft. Oh, she's a chunky boy. Look at that. 100% autonomous from takeoff to landing. Presumably, this is Ardupilot. Cruise speed, 15 to 19 meters per... Is meters per second the standard for cruise speed? I don't know what that is. What is that in 40 miles an hour? That's reasonable. 2 kilogram payload? I feel like we could do better than 2 kilograms, guys. Maximum takeoff weight, 8.5 kilograms. What's it cost? What's it cost? Tell me what it costs. What does it cost? It's a cool product. What does it cost? Yeah, it seems cool. There's a lot of stuff out there in this category, so I can't really say whether this is like a particular good one. Looks cool. You send me one, I'll play with it. I'm not promising I'll make a video about it, but I'll screw around with it. I only have experience with hobby stuff that I effed up. I have little experience with commercial stuff. Pete FPV asks, with increasing gyro sampling rates like 32 kilohertz, are we approaching the limits of useful signal processing in Betaflight, or is there still untapped performance and higher refresh rates? No, Pete, you have it backwards, dude. 32 kilohertz processing was a fad. It was a fad that only made things worse. By going to so the gyros that we're using, most of them have a native sampling rate of 8 kilohertz, and you can unlock like a raw 32K mode. The gyro has built-in filtering of some kind to get down from the raw 32K sampling rate to 8 kilohertz. It's oversampling or whatever. And when you go to the raw 32K mode, it turns out that the filtering and so forth that Betaflight does is worse than what the gyro has built in. Go figure. The gyro manufacturer did a better job of figuring out how the gyro should work than the Betaflight devs. So there was a trend a while back to do 32K sampling, and it resulted in worse flight, is the short version. The Betaflight devs, sometimes it didn't make problems. A lot of times it did make problems. Noisy gyro, twitchy flight, hot motors, random. It basically made the whole flight controller less resilient to mechanical problems and electrical problems for no discernible improvement in flight performance. And the Betaflight devs, at least, were like, forget it. And they just disabled 32K sampling as an option in software. And it's all 8K and below now. So not only are we approaching the limits of useful signal processing, we already approached those limits and exceeded them and then dialed back. Higher refresh rates. And it sort of makes sense if you think about it, because of Nyquist's sampling theorem, right? At 8K sampling, we are accurately sampling data up to 4 kilohertz. So the question is, the drone's physical movement is in the range of 150 hertz or lower, shall we say. Like mid-throttle oscillation is using like 80 to 120 hertz, something like that. So if you're sampling up to like 200 hertz, you're good to go. But there are still advantages to sampling faster. Reduced latency, additional resolution for filtering, better tolerance to, when you filter, you add latency, you add phase delay. By sampling faster, you can improve on some of that stuff. But by the time you get to 8 kilohertz, that's plenty. There are only disadvantages to going higher at that point. Pathogenic says refresh rates surely depend on the ground or the turn speed, so a 200-mile drone would want a higher rate. No, not at all. Not at all. Disagree. But even if that's true, your sampling at 8 kilohertz is so much more than you need regardless. It's fine. You probably could sample slower. Like there's drones out there that only sample at 4K. I defy you to find any difference between them in terms of their PID tune and so forth. Could we use a multi-gyro fusion approach? Yes, gyro fusion has been used in Betaflight and CleanFlight. The problem is, so what you do is you take two gyros and you orient one 45 degrees to the other or 90 degrees to the other. And now you basically can cancel out the internal noise of the gyros by doing math. You can tell the difference between vibration that's due to internal noise versus vibration that's due to actual movement of because the x-axis on one correlates to the y-axis on the other, and if you subtract them out, you increase the signal-to-noise ratio. The problem with that is this. You've got two gyros on the flight controller. One of them goes bad, which happens a lot on, not a lot, but it happens on FPV drones more than it happens on like your cell phone, because FPV drone is constantly undergoing vibration and crashing and being bashed around. So you have two drones, two gyros, you're doing sensor fusion, one of the gyros goes bad. And now all your gyro data is screwed up. How can you tell that you have a bad gyro? That is a much more complicated question to solve than it seems like it should be. Like, you look at both the gyros and one of them's clearly effed up and the other one's fine. It's if it were that simple, then the devs would have done it. And the problem is they released these gyros, these flight controllers with dual gyros. And what would happen is, because you have two gyros, you now have twice the chance of a gyro failing. Right? The more gyros you have, the more the odds that one of them is going to fail. Right? And so these flight controllers with dual gyros would have an increased rate of bad gyros. It's not that high of a rate, but it was increased. And then your quadcopter would suddenly start flying badly, and it kind of wasn't obvious why unless you knew about this. And you could go in and you could manually set the quadcopter to use just one gyro. And if that fixed the problem, then you could conclude that the other gyro was bad. But what happened was people just had these flight controllers, and again, the software filtering is already doing a pretty good job. So then they add sensor fusion and the gyro is a little bit cleaner, but the filtering already is doing a pretty good job of cleaning it up. So it's a little cleaner and you could run a little less filtering, but then one day suddenly it starts flying like crap and you have no idea why. And that was a net negative, and the industry, the FPV industry, has moved away from sensor fusion, from gyro fusion.
Right, it's 2 o'clock, time for Super Chats.
Oh, God, I've run completely out of time. I was having so much fun talking. Super Chats. Yes, of course. Richie's FPV, thank you for $7 Super Chat. I'm having an issue with my HDZero goggles where I get wild static in all mic input modes. I'll put a video in the troubleshooting chat. I think that even the internal mic, even the built-in internal mic, that's the question. Richie's FPV, get back to me while I do the rest of the Super Chats. V3RSO Edits, thank you for 15 of some currency that I don't recognize. I just want to say I'm a new pilot. Your channel was very helpful. What advice can you give me? What advice can I give you as a new pilot? It's too general, dude. It's too general. Be safe. Raise your throttle after you disarm so you can't accidentally flip the arm switch. Buy spares. Practice in the simulator. It's too general. Sorry, man. Thumper FPV, good to see you again, man. Thank you for $5. Have you ever thought about working with underwater drones? I would watch a video with the crazy fizzy over sure. Fuck you, Joe Thumper. Sorry, guys. Sorry for swearing. I know some people don't like that. Thumper FPV is a guy I know who just bought a boat, and he wants one of these, but he doesn't want to pay for it. He wants me to abuse my position as a YouTube creator to get them to send me one. Contact us. Don't hesitate to contact us. Customer service. Okay, support. Media inquiries. There we go. That's what I want. Media inquiries. Okay. Thumper, you piece of son of a bitch. I am gonna do that for you. Okay. I will request one for you, and we'll see what happens. Let's see here. I've lost my questions. There we go. Where's my social stream? Where's my? I lost my window. Damn it. Shoot. Where's the rest of my super chats, Blunty? Shedding quads is amazing for noobs, says Only Drones. Thank you for £2. Squatting quads. Did we get an answer, Blunty, from Nitro? No, from... What was the question? Shoot. Why do most FPV motor designs stick to radial flux configurations when axial flux motors offer higher torque to weight ratios, PEET-FPV? PEET-FPV, I don't know what those terms mean. You should ask Chris Rosser. And if you want, I'll give him $5 so I pass on your super chat. But I don't know enough about motor design to answer that question. I'm sorry. Okay, we have to wrap up. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you tomorrow in the next one. Bye, everybody. Have a great stream, Siati. Sorry for running over your time.